If your focus stacking routine doesn't include a well thought out plan for retouching, then you're leaving on the table the single biggest opportunity to improve your macro photography. I'll tell you why. Retouching is an absolutely indispensable part of any focus stacking workflow. And if you're not using it, you are not turning out pictures of the quality you could be. And I stand by that. It is almost never, I can't think of a single time I've ever stacked a photograph and the output from the stacking software was my final image. Not even close. The reason is that most stacking programs use a couple of different algorithms, and you should use both because they do different things. They reveal different kinds of detail, whether it's color, texture, fine detail. All of these things combine together into the final image, and if you're only using one algorithm, you're leaving half of that on the table. Your picture may not have a lot of artifact in it, fine, but it's still not the best picture it could be. So what I'm going to do today is walk you through my workflow, but with a focus on the retouching part. I cannot separate retouching from focus stacking using some kind of a sub-stack routine, like a slabbing routine, because it drastically decreases the amount of time you spend in retouching. So in order to retouch properly, in my opinion, you need to slab as well. So I will go back through the slabbing stuff very, very quickly just to refresh your memory by showing you how I do it on the computer. And then as we go, I'll explain to you why this is so important and what you can get out of it that you otherwise couldn't. Couple of announcements first. Getting disturbing reports from out at Light Glass Optics. Apparently, Jeff is now under his desk with his few remaining Mitutoyos, which he has named apparently, Betty and Ethel and Fiona. All girls apparently. I think we need to buy those from him quickly so that he can kind of get some closure. I think he's regretting this whole idea of giving them away at half price. But anyway, give him a call, buy one. There aren't many left. Okay, I know you'll do the right thing. As always, I want to take a minute to thank my Patreon supporters and the people who support me in other ways, either with their time or their energy or their money through the website. However, I really, really do appreciate it. I'm going to be talking about Zerene today. The reason I'm going to be talking about Zerene is because it's the stacking program that I prefer. And a lot of people have asked me over the years, why do I prefer that one over Helicon? And well, I've not been able to give a good answer recently because it's been a long time now since I used it. And the worst answer you can give to somebody when they ask you a question like that is, oh, just I always have. That says nothing. So what I did yesterday was I bought Zerene, the Pro Edition, and I'm going to install it on the computer and I am going to use it for a week. And at the end of that period of time, I will put together a head-to-head comparison of the two from the perspective of, I guess, an advanced focus stacker. I will be using all of the features that it has to offer and comparing them directly to what I use in Zerene. And then next time we talk about this, I will tell you which program does what better and give you some real solid advice. Congratulations to Jamie Messer and Bud Perot. Both of you were the winners of our t-shirt competition for the K&F tripod and the K&F magnetic filter set. You guys have got to be the smartest and most intelligent viewers any YouTuber has on their channel. I laughed so hard reading your comments the other day. Absolutely fantastic. I drew these two names at random. Bud Perot's a supporter of the program and been around a while. Jamie Mess is new to watching my stuff. In fact, he may not be watching it anymore because he doesn't know he's won. So Jamie, or somebody who knows Jamie, tell Jamie to call me or text me or email me or drop by the house to pick up your prize. Otherwise, I'm going to sell it and buy pins. All right, so Jamie Messer, Bud Perot, congratulations. In the next giveaway, I have 37 Hasselblad H6D 400Cs that I'll be giving away. I don't, obviously I don't. Nobody does. That would be 37 times 47,000. That's just a lot of money. So no, I'm not giving that away. I'll give away some blue tack and a packet of pins, maybe. So what is the difference between retouching and editing? This will come up over and over again, so I thought I would define them for you. Now, they're probably about the same thing in most people's minds, but in the mind of a twisted and contorted focus stacker like me, they have completely different meanings. I like to think of retouching as scrapbooking. Just don't look at me like that. And I like to think of editing as finger painting. Right. So what happens when you retouch is you take all of the pieces of information that you have all these outputs and inputs into the program. You take the pieces that work for your picture from each of those outputs and put them into a new picture. That's the scrapbooking analogy. That's retouching. Editing, on the other hand, is where you take that finished picture out of your focus stacking program into Photoshop or whatever editor you use. And that's where you actually create and destroy stuff. That's where you take away elements or you add elements or you add color or texture or whatever it is you're going to do to improve the photograph. But it's very different from the strictly limited world of retouching because you're not adding anything new in retouching. You're just reorganizing the photograph. Okay? This is important because there are things that you can do in editing that you can't do in retouching, but also there are things that you can do in retouching that you can't do in editing, which is why you need to do both. All right. So what we'll do is this. My workflow starts with taking pictures. Didn't need to say that, did I? That was a waste of a sentence, as was that explaining it. Okay, well, you start with taking pictures, and that's where we're going to start. I have chosen a subject that I know is going to need to be retouched because it has a lot of the features that typically do need to be retouched. So what we'll do is we'll go through the whole thing start to finish. I'll race through the slabbing part because slabbing and retouching to me are inseparable. If you stack but don't slab, your retouching becomes onerous and difficult and it takes a lot of time. But if you slab and retouch, the retouching becomes relatively easy. So I'm going to show you the way I do it, which I think is the best way. That's why I do it that way. And then we'll see where it goes from there. So let's head back to the computer and pick a subject and go from there. So here we are in Lightroom. Now, retouching makes your photographs better. Slabbing always makes retouching easier. That is why I do these together. Now, I did a whole video on slabbing the other day. I'm going to run through it very, very quickly as we get these photographs over into Zerene. Now, this is a small stack, just big enough for me to show you the advantages of slabbing. You need to shoot as if you're going to retouch. So you need to make sure that your subject is well lit. You don't have areas that are hot or areas that are black. You definitely want to avoid black areas, both in your background and in your subject. These are the ones that I selected. Notice that I am not doing anything in the develop module, except one thing. If you can crop any unnecessary background out of your photographs, it will drastically increase the speed of the process. Then we're just going to right click on one of them and send the whole lot into Zerene Stacker. So export to Zerene Stacker or Helicon or whatever it is you're using. The process is different with Photoshop, but you wouldn't be sending a stack this big to Photoshop unless you were going on vacation and it was going to do it while you were gone. By the way, while that's loading, if you do not have or do not use a tablet, and I'm thinking primarily of the Wacom tablets now, that I use the Intuos Pro, the medium size one, which is about exactly the same size as the small one I discovered. But they're fantastic, and for this kind of retouching, they do make it a lot easier to have a pen to use instead of a mouse. Retouching with a mouse is difficult, so if you have one and you haven't been using it, now would be a good time to get it out and give it a try. So that's it. The pictures are already in Zerene. When I say slab in every case, I really mean slab in every case, unless you've got just a dozen photographs, because these are all legitimate inputs. Any one of these photographs could be used as a source in the retouching. The problem is there's so many of them. You want to have to go through 70 individual photographs looking for a particular feature that you want to use? No, you don't. So you want to boil that down. So what we'll do is a slabbing routine. In Zerene, you go to batch, slabbing, batch slabbing. That sounds rude to me. The areas we're concerned about are the number of frames in a slab and the amount of overlap between the frames. Now, normally I shoot 10 and 3 when I'm anything over 100 pictures. But seeing as I have fewer pictures here, I'm going to tighten the groups up a bit. I think probably I'll go to 6 and 2 is a bit too low. I'll leave it on 8 and 3. That'll be fine. That'll give us lots of source material. And we're going to run Pmax algorithms. Pmax is the detail algorithm. Think of it that way. And yeah, we don't have to do anything with this now because we're going to save them when they're run. So once you've picked the two numbers, basically, leave the rest the way it is. Click apply. OK. A second dialog opens, run all batches, and then close that dialog box. What Zerene is going to do is align the images, and that's what it's doing now. It is not unusual if you rename files as you're importing, as some people do, that Lightroom kind of randomly imports. It imports in a strange order sometimes. And what can happen if you rename on import is all of a sudden your images can be badly out of order. They weren't in the order shot. In Lightroom, by selecting your file and then clicking arrange by capture time, it'll put them back in the correct order. But if they have been renumbered out of order, you should probably rename them again once they are in order as shot. The way you do that is go to the library, go down to rename photos. If they were all highlighted, you could just come up with a name and a sequence. I'll show you exactly what I mean because I've got them all highlighted. I could call them BI margin if I wanted, even though it isn't, and then it would number them 1 to 70. That way I would be certain that when they were taken into Zerene, they would be in the correct order, because if they're not, Zerene will align them and the output will be horrible. It's strange that it allows it, but it will go through and put in order all of the shots, even though they are not in the order shot. So it will enlarge some and shrink others. But because they're out of order, when it goes to stack them, you end up with just a big ball of multicolored artifact. And it's very distracting. And you can't do anything with it. You have to go back and start over. Once the images have all been aligned, you can see that Zerene is grabbing 8 of them at a time, and it is stacking them together into a Pmax output, which is showing up over here on the right. And then it immediately moves on to the next one. And it's saving these in the box on the bottom left, the output images. Output images and input images are treated differently by Zerene, and we cannot just drag and drop these back into the input box, which is what you would intuitively want to do if you were going to stack the outputs. Instead, we have to save them and then re-import them as the next step. And I'll show you how we do that in just a minute, as soon as the program's finished with all of the stacks. There were 70 pictures, and I'm using 8 in a picture, so it's going to be about 14 or 15 slabs. These are the slabs. Now, the slabs are going to be chunks of our fly that are in focus. So instead of just having a thin slice that's in focus, we'll have a fairly decent 8 photograph slab that's in focus. So that when we go hunting for the various bits and pieces we need to fix the output to create the perfect image, we only have to go through 14 or 15 slabs instead of 70 individual pictures. The 2 algorithms that Zerene uses are just different ways of stacking the data. The pyramidal algorithm puts out much better detail. It puts out fine detail with far less artifact like transparency and haloing. The Dmap version gives you much richer and more natural colors and surface textures. And really, neither of the images looks right by itself. The Dmap's usually got a lot of artifact, and the Pmax is usually very flat, very bright, and lots of detail, but it's an ugly photograph. So our goal is to blend the two. Good timing, that's it. So that's the batch execution done. So all of our slabs have been prepared. We click OK, then we select the last and shift click the first of our slabs like so, and then we go to File, Save Output Images, save them as TIFFs. You may notice that the naming convention that I use for my slabs is a little convoluted. It has a date and a time and the method that was used to shoot. That is important when it comes to this step of trying to find these in a file that has tens of thousands of stacked images. So I go to File, Add Files to bring these back in to the inputs. And then I look for 812, it's about 1500 o'clock. When they're all highlighted and you're sure you're not dragging in a dragonfly picture from an adjacent stack, which would ruin everything, just click Open, and that will drop those exact same slabs now as inputs. Now, to stack inputs without stacking everything in there, you click on the first, shift click on the last, and then go to Stack, and you have 2 options. The first is you can stack in Pmax, which these are already Pmax, or you can stack in Dmap. And you must, this is an absolute, you must do both. So begin by doing a Pmax. That'll be the quickest. The reason is you're going to use the Pmax for your details, and I'll show you what I mean by that in just a second. So it's compiling the slabs into a final Pmax output. You can see it's bright, it's crispy looking, it has loads of preserved detail, but the colors and textures are pretty flat looking. That's not a very appealing fly. Well, none of them are, but that's a particularly not appealing one. Let's go to Stack, and this time we're going to hit Dmap. But before we do, let me just double check my settings, because I change. Look at that. I've got it set on 97%. You wouldn't believe there was one that needed an estimation radius like that, but there was. I did a spider this morning that needed that. So what I'm going to do is set for a fly with a lot of crossing stuff. It's probably going to be close to about 15 and 7.5, which I think may be the factory reset. We're going to start there, see what it looks like. So once that is put into my preferences, then I can go to Stack, Selected, Dmap. And with any DMAP, it'll run halfway through the program, then ask me to set a contrast threshold, which is a slider that pops up, and it's going to pop up in about 5 more seconds. And then what I'll do is I'll tell Zerene what to pay attention to and what to ignore. Okay, here it is. It just popped up. My goodness, things are operating quickly today. It's because I trimmed the background. It's not trying to stack background, which is good. Okay, I hope you can see that. All right, so where it's set right now, it's gonna try to stack all of this, and I don't want it to do that. So I'm going to slide the threshold until the black, which is the exclusion zone, covers everything that I don't care about. I don't want that. I don't want to cut out any of the eye, and I want this for context. So I'm going to leave it just about there and then hit OK, and it'll finish the stack. And here we have the DMAP output, and it is really quite nice. There is artifact here. There's some areas that are real soft up in here. I can't see this antenna very clearly. We've got a little bit of haloing and transparency up here, but the color and the texture are fantastic. It looks great. The Pmax, on the other hand, doesn't have nearly as much transparency, and it fills in this part of that particular hair. Pretty much everything that is missing from the DMAP image is present in the Pmax image, and the Pmax image is only lacking all of that color and texture. This is unusual for me to get a good DMAP first. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for the problem areas, which are mostly artifact. The artifact will decrease as I drop the estimation radius. Most of it will, until I hit a point when we get a lot of artifact comes back. And I call that the low estimation radius artifact. It tells me I've gone too low. What we're going to do is just run one quick one, and that's the beauty of this. It only takes just a second to run one. So I'm going to pull up the preferences again. This time I'll drop it to, let's drop it to about 7. And I leave the smoothing radius half of whatever that is. It goes there by default. So once I've put those new settings in, I go back to stack selected DMAP, and we'll see if the second DMAP's any better. Yesterday I was shooting, this morning I was shooting a spider, and my initial DMAPs were so bad that I kept increasing the estimation radius until I got to 97%. That was the best one. Most people will tell you that you'll be around 15 or 20 with your estimation radius, but I have no problem going to 100 if that's what it takes to get the best image, because that's what we have to start, is the best image. All right, as you lower the estimation radius, you will be able to increase the contrast threshold without impinging on the areas that you want, and vice versa. So we chopped in half the estimation radius, so it means I can move the contrast threshold to the right without blacking out anything I'm interested in. So hopefully this will get it closer to the Pmax output, yet still retain the color. Let's see. That's a big improvement, quite a big improvement. That's starting to look like a colorful Pmax. Let's compare it to the last one. Yeah, see the halos around the hairs on the head here, white halos. The second one, the second DMAP, has considerably less. We'll retouch this one. It's maybe a little worse in areas, but I want to show you how to use the various retouch tools. So what is retouching? Retouching is taking the best DMAP of 2 or 4 or 8 or as many as you need to photograph to get one that you say, that's the best. That's the best starting place. The better the starting place, the less you have to do, the better it's going to look. Then what we do is we look at the input images and the output images, and anything that needs to either be replaced because it looks bad in the target image, or if there's something even better on the source image that we can replace it with. In other words, we use retouching to remove bad stuff and add good stuff, but it's all from existing photographs. So here's the second absolute rule. No, it's probably like the fourth absolute rule by now, but when you begin retouching, your first source material needs to be the Pmax stack of your slabs. That's the first final image we pulled. Here it is to show you. That always has to be your first one. The reason is, this is the only other image that we have where everything is in focus. Meaning, when I retouch something and I paint over the lines, what I'm painting in is also in focus, because you'll see when we get to using the slabs as sources, not everything underneath a hair is going to be in focus. And if you're not careful, you start painting in out of focus material. So you don't want to do that. So we start with the easiest, which is the Pmax. So in order to start retouching, click on the target image, the one you want to be your target, which we're saying is this one. As soon as it loads, great. Go to Edit, Start Retouching. Let it load. Okay, so this is our target image now loaded. Now, here's what I recommend you do. Go to the top right-hand corner, hit the big square, and get the full-sized image on your whole screen. You have to hold the shift bar and swipe with 2 fingers to enlarge, and you can also hold the space bar and grab with the hand and move things around too. So we'll start up here because there's lots of stuff to show you up here. Now, the first retouch image, and we can select a new source image at any time by clicking on it. But we're going to start with this one. This is the Pmax output. By the way, I was talking about naming conventions earlier. I brought that up because I wanted to show you the naming convention I use for my slabbed Dmaps. Because I'll sometimes do 10 of them, the most important thing to me is, what is the estimation radius? That's what I'm changing with every one. There is a way in the options menu under preferences and file naming. I might as well show it to you while we're here. Is it image saving? Probably it is. Yeah, where you can pick a template to use from a drop-down menu of several. And I pick the one that shows both the method and the estimation radius. That way I know which image I'm looking at, and that's important, okay? Just so as you know. All right, so you click on the first one we're going to use, and because it's a rule, it's always going to be the Pmax. That opens it up behind this image. Now, to see it, you have to press on a Mac the Alt or Option key, and I mean the Option key, and on one of those other computers, what are they called? Old computers, you would press the Alt button. Now, sliding 2 fingers up and down resizes the paintbrush, or if you're using a stylus, you just do it the way you would normally do it. Now, when we paint on this image, whatever is underneath will show up in its place. Let me tell you what the brushes are. There are 3 special brushes and one much more special brush that's called the ordinary brush or the default brush. Let me show you what I mean. There's a drop-down menu. You need the Pro edition for this, but I'm presuming that's the one most of you have. If I select the lighten brush, then paint on this image, only things that are underneath that will result in a lighter final pixel will be carried over. So let's say I want to bring the tip of this bristle, which is on the underlying Pmax picture, so I do want it. Let's bring that up onto this picture, and I use the lighten brush, and nothing happens because pixels that I want brought up are darker. So I'd have to use the darken brush. And if you just remember that, then you've got these tools down perfectly. So now if I paint with a darken brush, it compares the pixels underneath my brush and says, yeah, they're darker. We'll put them in. They're even darker than this dark stuff. But notice how it's not painting in over the dark areas in the lighter dark stuff. Did that make any sense? Of course it didn't. Let me show you what the pixels brush does. That transfers anything that is in the underlying photograph to the top photograph. So about the only time you can use it with impunity is when you are retouching from a source image that is already focus stacked. In other words, everything's in focus underneath it. They are the three specialty brushes: darken, lighten, and then just direct transfer pixels. But what is probably the most amazing brush in the whole lot, and the one that should be used first in virtually every case, is probably Rick Littlefield's greatest single invention in this whole thing, is this brush. Because this brush has a brain, if you will. It knows when to darken and it knows when to lighten, and it will fix most of your problems if you just trust it. For example, it'll get rid of this halo without batting an eye. Notice that I'm not painting anywhere I really don't need to. All I'm trying to do here is get rid of the halo. So I paint over the halo. This is just good practice in retouching. I could just paint over everything, and all it's going to do is move what's ever underneath. Let's have a look at it. It's going to be a spotty looking hair. Yeah, like that. It's going to move that up. So we just really need to focus on the specific thing we're trying to accomplish with each brush stroke. So here we go. And this, I get asked, how do you get rid of halo more often than any other question in focus stacking? And this is how. You paint it out with the retouch tool that is provided for you. It does a whole lot more than just this. The kind of things that we have to retouch change. So notice, by the way, I can paint in the lower layer while looking at it too, just by holding the Alt or Option key down. I don't have to be on the target image like this if I want to see what it is I'm painting. See, that's not good either. You can see the lenses all the way from the eye all the way through the transparency. Transparency is incredibly common in high magnification stuff like this. So what else do we have? We have classic, let me make a slightly bigger brush for that. We have classic crossing transparency. This is one of the most common artifacts you're going to find, along with splooge, which is this stuff. Now, in this case, the Rick brush, the default brush, should work perfectly. It's kind of designed to do that. But also, because splooge is almost always white, so would the darken brush work very well here. In fact, you could fix a whole lot of trouble up here just with a darken brush by painting over the whole thing, and it'll bring back most of the hairs and make the crossing places look normal and natural. So that's a nice quick way to knock out a whole bunch of your retouching. Notice we haven't even left the first Pmax image yet. So we haven't got to the hard part of retouching. And sometimes you don't have to. Sometimes you can do everything right here. And this is the work of just a few minutes. Okay, so let's say we have salvaged every single bit of good information from the Pmax, and it's time to look at the slabs. I recommend you go through each of the slabs in order, don't miss any, and go from superficial in the picture to deep. Now, that will usually mean going from the next Pmax down will usually be the most superficial. In this case, it's not, probably because of the way I numbered them. you can see that it's the back that's in focus. Never go from deep to superficial. The reason is you want to be painting your detail on the most superficial level, because it gets less important as you get deeper into the image, where you'll be painting the background around it. So always start at, and you can use either one of these source images, but always start at the superficial most point on the photograph and work your way down. I always start on Rick's details brush unless there is a compelling reason not to, like I know it's going to need a darken brush. See how it removes the halo and just beautifully paints in the antenna. Now it's not doing a super good job with the background, is it? And you know why? It's because I thought we were still on the first Pmax, the one that's in focus, and I've just been willy-nilly painting out of focus background. Command Z will backspace you, and thank goodness it lets you go back loads and loads of different spaces. I don't want to be trying to paint background in now. I just want to get the foreground structures that are important to me with the smallest brush I can handle. Okay, that's going to have to be good enough. Some of this, there's no doubt I'm going to end up doing in Photoshop. Look, this is out of focus and I'm painting it in. If you paint in out of focus, you're going to have to paint it again. So just don't do it. Okay, beautiful. That's as much as we're going to get from this layer. So we start working our way deeper into the image, one slab at a time. What we're doing here is we are incrementally improving the picture. And when I look at the picture, I'm comparing, oh, that's in focus and we don't have it in the target image. So I'm going to paint it in. And it's one step at a time, making the picture slightly more accurate, slightly more detailed, and it gradually comes together. Let me show you the one other thing that you need to be aware of. Let's say we have gone through all of the slabs and we started with the Pmax and we've gone through all of the slabs and we still have a piece or a bit, say we've got one lens that never gets in proper focus or something like that. I mean, there'll always be something that you could improve upon. That's when you want to go to the original source images. You do not have to go through every one of them because you went through the slabs. And that's the other take home from this. If you do this right and start with the slabs, you only have to go to the individual source images as a last resort. Let's say that this hair never showed up for whatever reason. It never showed up in any of the images. And I want to put this hair back in, but I want to maintain the background, which looks like the shag carpet in my first apartment. So in this case, we know that it's about 2/3 of the way through the image. So it's going to be about 2/3 of the way from the top to the bottom. So pick something fairly oh, I was pretty close. I was only maybe 10 off. The focus is behind that, so I've gone too far. If you're using a PC or a computer that works, you can scroll through these like a film strip, which is the best way to find them. So there's about 7 or 8 frames altogether that have parts of this hair, and we're going to have to take the in-focus bits from each of them to get this bristle put back in. It is tedious work. Fortunately, I would say that on most photographs, I don't ever come to a source image. I can get everything I need from the slabs. Okay, so I know you get the point. This is just something you have to do. And when you're done looking at all the slabs and then as necessary fixing anything from individual files, go back to the Pmax one more time. The reason for that is you have changed the photograph now. You've improved a lot of things, and some stuff that may not have been apparent when you were at the Pmax initially might now be. So it looks like we're not making any progress. I know it does, but we are. And oh, I went over the lines there. Oh, and there. Clumsy. In fact, what do you think we have to do if we do that, if we go over the lines? Well, that's what we can do when we get back to Pmax. Remember, because Pmax, everything is in focus. So let's say I fix this hair, it's completely black and we're done. That was the last thing I had to do. Go back to your first Pmax output, which is your last Pmax. It's this one right here. Click on that as our source. There you go. There's the background and it looks absolutely fantastic. So all I have to do, wherever I splooged over it like that, I'll use the regular brush here. I just go and paint it out. Okay, I'm gonna stop with this because once I start, I'll keep going. When all of this is fixed, when all of the retouching is done, I'm still gonna take this into Photoshop to fix the background, to do a little color correction, to remove bits of detritus that are stuck to its eyeballs, and so on and so on. So to recap, the key things to remember one last time is when you're retouching, retouch first from the Pmax stack. Second, go through the slabs from superficial to deep. Third, go back to the source images if there's anything that you need to pull from the original photograph, and then back to the Pmax. When you are done with the Pmax for the second time, go up to edit, commit retouching, and your finished image will be here. And if you're happy with it and you're not going to have to make any changes, make sure it's highlighted on the left under output images and go to File, Save Output Images as a TIFF, and it will ask you where to put it. Tell it to put it back in the file you have the originals in, and it'll form part of the original folder, so that you have all of your images, your inputs, your outputs, and your final image all together in the same place. It'll tell you when it's done, and now you can close the project and close Zerene. But there's one thing you still have to do that perplexes people if you're not aware of it, and that is you come over to Lightroom and you can't find the picture, but you know you just saved it. That's because you haven't synchronized the folder. So go to your library module, go to the particular folder you're in. I think it was this one, the one that said WASP. Yeah. And then when you're in that folder, go to library and synchronize folder. It'll ask you how many of the pictures you want to import. Just click synchronize, and then it'll show you a dialog where you pick which photographs you want to bring in. And my recommendation is, if you don't want to lock up your computer, select them all and import them all. Check all, then go to the right, import, and then it'll open them up nice and quickly once they're imported. Now, what this is importing, by the way, is the slabs as well as the output images. So we have everything we need if we want to go back and do this again. That is our final image, and from here we would just take it over into Photoshop to clean it up, save it back to Lightroom, and you're finished. I know that is a lot of information, and it's a fairly complicated workflow, yet it makes such a difference. I wouldn't do it if there was an easier way to do it, which there really isn't. There's no other way that you can combine all the good elements from all of the possible inputs to create the most lifelike, colorful, well-textured, accurate image that you possibly can from your subject. It works at all magnifications, and it works with all subjects. Some are harder than others. The absolutely crucial elements to all of this are to shoot, to retouch. So be thinking about your retouching when you select your lighting, when you set up your shot, when you choose your lens. Think about the retouch. Slab every time. Unless you have 10 pictures in your stack and are ready to go through all of them to retouch slab first. Retouch using the method that I showed you. Go from front to back and go from the full Pmax first, always. You can get 90% of the way there. And that's it. If you don't know Photoshop, learn Photoshop, because the things that I showed you that you can't fix with retouching, you can fix in Photoshop, but some of it needs a few fairly advanced techniques. So that's everything. Remember those things, get lots of practice, and you will be glad you did. It's going to be a lot easier for people who are just getting started and will learn the right way to do it. It's going to be a bit more challenging for people who've been focus stacking for 20 years, and this is going to involve doing things differently. But if you want to max your potential, you need to do this. At least give it a try. Coming up next, we have a Raynox Mitu Toyo video, followed by a review of Helicon, Zerene, head-to-head. We've got some insect prep videos coming up, which are going to involve a new Leica microscope. And then another review. We're going to be reviewing this handy dandy, that would not be good if that rolled off the table. Handy dandy 100mm pocket macro lens for your phone from Apexel. If you need to ask me a question or want to ask me a question or leave me a message, please do so on Discord. So Discord is the place to be. That is where I will address your queries. Check the show notes for other important information and your invitation to Discord. That's it. Thanks for watching. Be safe, be well. See you in a few days. Cheerio.